Hi, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we have a new life story. Let's begin.
He didn't even look up from the tray of hors d'oeuvres he was arranging. Little crackers topped with smoked salmon and some sort of lemon cream, the kind of thing that required tweezers, apparently. I was standing in the kitchen holding a glass tin of sugar cookies I'd stayed up baking the night before. I'd even wrapped the tin in red ribbon, tied neatly at the top. "Sorry?" I asked, thinking I'd misheard. He finally glanced at me. Not unkindly, but like I was a delivery driver who'd brought something to the wrong address. "Nick's fiance's family is coming into town," he explained, brushing crumbs off the counter. "Her parents are very refined. Her father used to be a state senator in California. Her mother runs art galas. They're staying with us this week." "I know," I said quietly. "That's why I came early. I brought Mom her favorite cookies." My father's smile was polite. "Nick asked for things to be a certain way. Clean. Professional. You understand." It took a moment for me to absorb what he was saying, not because it was unclear, but because it was crystal clear. This wasn't just a schedule mix-up or an awkward reshuffling of plans. This was a disinvitation. He didn't say, "Don't come for Christmas." He didn't need to. It was in the air. Sterile, curated, and spotless, like the whole house had been purged of anything too real, too raw, too me. "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't want to ruin the vibe." He didn't catch the sarcasm. Outside, the wind bit against my coat as I walked to my car. The snow had just begun to fall, fat, lazy flakes drifting under the street lamp. I sat behind the wheel with the cookies still in my lap, fingers wrapped around the tin like it was something alive. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked like a girl who'd shown up to the wrong party. Back home, my rented duplex on the edge of Norwich, 2 towns over, I placed the tin on the kitchen counter. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't turn on any lights. I just stood there, in the dark, lit faintly by the street lamp outside, wondering when I'd stop being part of my own family's story. I'd always felt like a footnote in their narrative, useful when needed, forgotten when not. When Mom had shingles last year, I drove her to her appointments 3 times a week. When Nick's crypto venture tanked, I quietly wired him $5,000 and never asked for it back. When Dad's truck died in the middle of a blizzard, I towed it to my shop and spent 12 hours fixing the engine by hand. But none of that bought me a seat at the table this year. Christmas morning came and went in silence. No texts, no missed calls, no invitations after the fact. I made myself scrambled eggs and toast. Not because I was hungry, but because routine still meant something. At noon, I bundled up and drove to the home of a woman named Gloria, a regular customer who'd left me a voicemail days ago. "Garage door stuck again. 3rd time this month. I hate to ask around the holidays." She greeted me at the door in a pink robe and thermal socks, clutching a mug that said, "Old Broads Rule." Her hair was tucked in curlers, and her face lit up like she'd seen her granddaughter. "You came," she said, surprised. "Didn't have much else going on," I replied. "Bless your heart." The garage door was an easy fix. Frozen sensor, some worn rollers. But I stayed longer than I had to. Brought in her mail, changed a light bulb she couldn't reach, replaced the dead batteries in her thermostat. Listened to her tell stories about her husband, gone 7 years now, and how he used to sneak figgy pudding into every holiday potluck. Before I left, she gave me a tin of peanut brittle. Not much, but for someone who still shows up. That sat with me longer than I expected. On my way back, I passed my parents' house. The driveway was lined with luxury cars. The windows glowed gold. Laughter floated through the air like smoke. I saw Nick through the bay window, raising a wine glass. His fiancée looked radiant in cream silk. My mother was smiling at her like she'd hung the moon. I didn't slow down. Back home, I built a fire in my small stone fireplace, curled up in my worn leather chair with a blanket, and opened Gloria's tin. The brittle was sweet, buttery, uneven in size. It cracked softly in my teeth, and for the first time all day, I felt full. I used to think my family didn't understand me, but I was wrong. They understood me perfectly. They just didn't approve. Growing up, I had always been the outlier. While Nick competed in debate tournaments and enrolled in pre-college summer camps, I was out back building a go-kart from lawnmower parts. While they took family photos and matching outfits, I was usually the one with grease under my nails, trailing 2 steps behind. I loved machines. I loved messes. I loved what could be rebuilt. They loved polish. My mother used to say, "You're not like the rest of us, Eliza." And she was right. But for too long, I thought that meant I was lesser, that I had to earn my way in through favors, gestures, humility. Now I understood some rooms were built to exclude you, and some families only know how to love what reflects their own image. I stopped trying to match theirs and decided to build a life that looked like me. The week after New Year's, my hands were raw from fixing a busted fuel pump in the middle of a sleet storm when I got a call from a man named Roland Sharp. His voice crackled over the speaker like gravel under tires. "You the one who fixed up Nate Hollis's CB750? He asked. "Depends," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "Is he mad or impressed?" "Impressed enough to call you a magician." That made me smile, despite the cold. Roland had a 1973 Norton Commando sitting in his barn. It hadn't run in 15 years, but it was a bike with bones, a frame that whispered, "Remember me?" He lived in a town called Whitlow, about 2 hours south of Norwich. Said if I didn't mind driving out, he'd like to see what I could do. I looked around my little shop. One lift, one fridge with a flickering bulb, and an overhead light that buzzed louder than the radio. It was enough, but barely. Text me the address," I said. I left at sunrise, thermos full, toolbox packed. Frost clung to the fields along the highway, and everything looked like it had been dipped in silver. Whitlow was a blink-and-you-miss-it kind of town. One main street, a post office with a crooked flag, and 2 gas stations that probably hadn't updated prices since 2007. Roland met me in flannel and denim, hair silver gray and braided down his back. He had the kind of eyes that made you feel like you were already being measured for something, respect or dismissal, depending on how you held yourself. The Norton was tucked under a dusty tarp in a corner of his barn, surrounded by stacked lumber and silent tools. The tank was rusted, seat torn, the carburetor practically fossilized. "It's a mess," he said. I knelt down, ran my hand over the frame. "So was mine when I started." That earned him a quiet chuckle. He offered me coffee and a bench to sit on while we talked. By the time I left, we'd struck a deal. I'd haul the bike back to my shop, and he'd let me use his barn for overflow work if things picked up. Neither of us knew then that we were laying the foundation for something bigger. Back at my garage, I stripped the Norton down to bones, cleaned each piece by hand, cataloged every bolt, ordered parts from 3 different states. For weeks, my evenings were a blur of grit, engine grease, and late-night podcasts. But the work felt good, like penance, almost, or prayer. I documented the whole process. Photos, time-lapse videos, little before and after shots I posted online with barely a caption. I didn't expect anything to come from it, but slowly, people noticed. A woman from Iowa messaged me about her late father's Triumph. A mechanic in Austin asked if I sold templates for my custom brackets. A biker group from Vermont reposted one of my rebuilds with the caption, "Best paintwork we've seen in years." By spring, I had over 4,000 followers and a waiting list. That's when Ivy rolled up in a dusty truck and dropped off a 2009 Triumph Bonneville. She wore beat-up boots, a worn denim vest, and the kind of energy that told you she didn't make small talk unless it was worth her time. "She saw what you did with that Honda," she said, voice rough like she'd swallowed gravel. "I want mine to growl." I laughed. "Louder than your truck?" She didn't smile, but her eyes did. We spent 10 minutes talking shop. Paint, exhaust mods, saddle shape. She wanted a matte black finish with gold striping and a tailpipe that sounded like thunder. "You ride?" she asked as I rolled her bike into the bay. I hesitated. "Not yet." She nodded. "You will." By midsummer, I had turned Roland's barn into something else. Not quite a second shop, but close. I installed shelves, bought a used MIG welder, laid down plywood for a parts area. Clients started showing up by appointment. I'd meet them in work boots, scribble quotes in grease pencil on cardboard, and take deposits in crumpled cash or PayPal, and I was booked solid. People came from 3 counties over because they'd heard about a woman who didn't just fix bikes. She resurrected them. Every dent was an opportunity. Every scar, a chance to reimagine. One evening, while sanding down the Norton's Trank, I got a message on my shop page. It was from a name I hadn't heard in years. Nick. "Hey, hope you're well. Thought you'd let me know that Mom mentioned your name at dinner the other night. Said you've got a business now? Sounds cool. Anyway, Allie's car's making a weird noise. Think you'd have time to look at it next time you're around?" There was no apology, no acknowledgement of last Christmas, no mention of the tin of cookies and the uninvited silence. Just a favor. As if we were still close. As if nothing had happened. I didn't reply. Later that night, I stood in the middle of the barn, looking at everything I'd built. 2 lifts, 5 bikes in process, a rack of helmets by the door. Ivy's Triumph gleamed under the fluorescent lights, just waiting for her to come pick it up. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No one handed this to me. No one called in favors. I made it with grit and grease and long nights when no one believed it would amount to anything. And now? Now I was the one people called when they needed something rebuilt. It started with an email. Subject: potential collaboration. At first, I thought it was spam, or maybe one of those schemes where someone wanted me to ship a custom motorcycle overseas and then vanish with the deposit. But the sender wasn't anonymous. It was a man named Alan Vance, executive editor at a boutique design magazine called Iron and Ember. I'd seen it once at a gas station in Raleigh. Grainy cover, slick interviews with motorcycle artists and boutique builders who treated chrome like sculpture. He had attached a link to my Instagram and wrote, "Minimalism, grit, precision. You've got a distinct voice. Ever think about doing a feature?" My first instinct was to ignore it. Features were for people with branded merch and overpriced keychains. I didn't have a logo. My photos were taken with a phone propped up on stacked paint cans. I built because it made sense in a world that often didn't. But something in me, it wasn't pride exactly, more like quiet validation, clicked. I replied. 3 days later, a freelance journalist named Sydney showed up at the barn with a cannon strapped around her neck and boots that had clearly never touched engine oil. She asked questions carefully, like she didn't want to scare the story out of me. How did you get started? What does restoration mean to you? What do you want people to feel when they see one of your builds? I didn't give her sound bites. I gave her truth. I want them to know something broken doesn't have to stay that way. She nodded slowly, like that line had weight. A month passed. I'd nearly forgotten about the interview when I got a ping on my phone. Ivy sent me a link with just 3 words. You made it. The article was live, titled The Wrench and the Wildfire: How One Woman Turned Rust into Revival. The layout stunned me. Full spreads of my bikes gleaming under natural light, close-ups of my hands calloused and sure, quotes highlighted in bold. People don't want perfect. They want something real that works. I was never the golden child. That worked out fine. At the bottom, a short bio. Eliza Langridge runs a custom motorcycle restoration shop out of Norwich and Whitlow. She doesn't advertise. She doesn't need to. That weekend, my voicemail filled up. Calls, texts, emails, people wanting quotes, photos, interviews. A supplier offered discounted parts in exchange for mutual shout-outs. But the message that made me freeze came from my mom. It was short, hollow. Saw your article. Looks like things are going well. Your father and I were surprised. Hope you're staying warm. No apology, no pride, no warmth. Just confirmation that they had finally seen me on a page, in print, next to a paragraph they couldn't ignore. And still, they didn't know what to say. A week later, my shop phone rang. Caller ID, Langridge Home. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again 20 minutes later. This time, I picked up. Nick's voice came through, hesitant, too casual. Hey, Liza, you, busy? I said, always, crouching beside a carburetor. He laughed like we were old friends. Saw that article. Crazy, huh? I mean, who would have guessed you'd end up in a magazine? I didn't respond. He kept going. So, listen, we've got this corporate retreat coming up. Allie's firm is hosting, and one of the sponsors is doing a motorcycle giveaway. Thought it would be cool if you, I don't know, donated something. Good PR for you. We could make it look real polished. Your name next to some big brands. There it was. Not pride, not reconciliation, just opportunity. He didn't see me as a sister. He saw me as leverage. I said, no. Wait, just hear me out. No, Nick, you don't get to discover me now because I'm useful. The silence on the line was thick. Geez, it was just an idea. You don't have to be so dramatic. I hung up. And this time, I didn't feel guilt. That night, I opened the shop alone. Rain tapped against the tin roof. I rolled out a tarp, poured black enamel into a spray gun, and started painting a vintage Ducati tank. I worked slow, methodical, focused. Like every motion wiped away a little more of who I used to be. Not the rejected daughter, not the silent one, just me. A woman with grease on her palms and grit in her chest, building something they could never take credit for. I didn't go to the next family holiday, or the one after that. I stopped waiting for a call. Stopped trying to measure my success by how loudly they clapped, because they never would. And that was fine. I wasn't building for them anymore. I was building for every girl who grew up being told she was too rough, too loud, too much. For every kid who got a toolbox instead of a tiara. Late one night, I posted a photo of Ivy's bike under moonlight, matte black with gold piping, kickstand catching the stars just right. The caption was simple. Still standing, still building, still mine. The next morning, I woke to thousands of likes. But more importantly, I woke up not needing them. I was under the hood of a 1971 Firebird when the bell over the front door chimed. Most people call first. This one didn't. Wiping my hands, I stepped out from the bay and froze. It was my mother, Janet Landridge, dressed in a camel coat and glossy leather boots, her purse cradled in both arms like a shield. She looked completely out of place, like someone had airlifted a socialite into the middle of a scrapyard. She stared at the bikes, the clutter, the old metal sign over the register that read, "No BS, time is money." "This place," she said quietly, "it's different from how I pictured it." I didn't say anything. I waited. She looked older than I remembered, not just in years, but in effort. Her perfectly styled hair was streaked with silver now, and her eyes didn't have that sharp gleam that used to. Just a dull uncertainty, like she wasn't sure why she'd come or how to start. I was in town. Nick's having a dinner party next week. Thought I'd stop by. "Why?" I asked, not cold, but honest. She swallowed. "I read that magazine article twice. I didn't recognize the woman in it at first. Confident, accomplished. People admire you, Eliza." I didn't know what to say to that because it didn't sound like praise. It sounded like surprise. "Dad doesn't know I'm here," she added quickly, almost guiltily. He wouldn't understand." "Because I'm not a winner?" I asked, voice flat. Her expression faltered. "He didn't mean it like that." "He meant it exactly like that." She stood there for a long time, looking around the space I had built. The floor coated in rubber dust, parts bins labeled in my handwriting, Ivy's Triumph glinting under a spotlight in the corner. I watched her take it all in like it was a foreign language she couldn't quite translate. Finally, she pulled something from her purse, a slim ivory envelope. "I know this isn't enough, but I thought it might be a start." I didn't reach for it. "What is it?" "A check," she said. "From me, not your father. Just something to help you expand, or buy a better lift, or whatever you need." I raised an eyebrow. "After all these years, that's how you want to reconnect? With money?" "No," she said quickly. "Not just that. I just, I wanted to give you something." I didn't need her money. What I wanted, what I'd always wanted, was to be seen, and not because someone wrote about me or because my name was finally in print. I wanted to be seen back when I was 16 and covered in axle grease, trying to replace the clutch in a pickup truck I couldn't afford, while my brother gave speeches about leadership at county fairs. I folded my arms. "You know what I need? I need to know why it took a magazine spread for you to acknowledge that I was never the embarrassment you treated me like." Her lips trembled, just slightly. I was scared. You were going down a path I didn't understand. I thought if I encouraged it, you'd get hurt or stuck or worse, fail. So you decided to let me fail alone? I thought it would motivate you." "It didn't." She looked down, ashamed, but not surprised. "You always said I was different, that I didn't fit the mold. You never thought that might be a good thing?" She didn't answer. I reached over, grabbed a rag, and wiped the oil from my hands. "I appreciate the gesture," I said, nodding toward the envelope, "but I built this from nothing. From people who believed in me when you didn't. From customers who paid in hugs and cookies and old stories. I don't need to be bought back into your good graces." "I'm not trying to buy you," she whispered. "I'm trying to come back." I looked her in the eye. "You don't get to come back into something you never helped build." The silence between us thickened, and I saw something shift in her face. Recognition, maybe, that I wasn't just angry. I was finished. She slowly put the envelope back into her purse. "I'm sorry," she said, and this time it sounded real, small, like something chipped off a long frozen wall. "I know," I said, "but I'm not building bridges anymore. I'm building engines." She smiled faintly, sad and proud at once. Then she turned and left. The bell chimed again, and she was gone. Later that evening, I found myself alone at the workbench. A light rain tapped on the metal roof. I poured a bit of whiskey into a mug, turned on the old radio, and sat down in front of a disassembled Yamaha engine like it was a puzzle made of truth. Some people wait a lifetime to hear, "I'm sorry." Some people never get it. But when it comes, you don't have to accept it like a gift. You can just put it on the shelf and move forward. I didn't think one article would change my life, but it did. Not overnight, not in a Hollywood slow motion montage, but like slow rain filling a bucket you didn't know was there, drip by drip until it overflows. 2 months after Iron and Ember published my feature, the magazine tagged me in a follow-up post on social media. Just a brief mention: our most shared story of the quarter. Readers loved Eliza Langridge's raw grit and restoration philosophy. That post went viral. Within hours, my inbox was a swamp of new messages. Journalists, podcasters, brand reps. 3 independent motorcycle brands offered free gear in exchange for collab content. One talent agency wanted to represent my brand in the mechanical influencer space. I deleted half of it. But one message stood out. It was from a woman named Shayna Gray, creative director at a mid-sized motorcycle company based in Colorado. She wasn't pitchy. She didn't offer money. She offered a plane ticket and a seat at a roundtable event called the Builders Summit. "No pressure," she wrote. "Just want you in the room. You belong there more than most." I wasn't sure if I believed that. I still did oil changes on old Buicks to keep the lights on. I still swept my own floors. I still drank instant coffee and forgot to invoice people on time. But the name nagged at me. The Builder Summit. I'd heard of it. 10 independent mechanics, designers, and builders. A closed-door session, no cameras, no suits, just people like me. Rough hands, sharp eyes, full notebooks. Shayna met me at the entrance. She wore all black and carried a clipboard like it was an extension of her spine. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I'm still deciding if I belong here." She smiled. "That's how we know you do." The next 3 days rewired my thinking. I met a woman from Detroit who built electric choppers out of abandoned junkyard frames. A guy from New Mexico who welded from a wheelchair and designed his own torque rigs. A former prison mechanic who taught himself design by reading old Haynes manuals under a cot lamp. We didn't talk about branding or algorithms. We talked about resistance, precision, identity, machines as metaphors. At one point, someone asked me what restoration meant in my shop. I answered without thinking, "It means I still believe in second chances." That one line ended up scribbled on the whiteboard behind us, underlined 3 times. Back home, the shop felt different. Not smaller, just more mine. Orders were coming in faster than I could keep up. People didn't just want repairs now, they wanted restorations. Wanted their stories built into the steel. A father's old ride turned into a tribute. A widow's scooter tuned for her first solo trip. And then Shayna called again. She said, "I want to sponsor a build. Full freedom, full funding, one-off project. You design it, you lead it, we showcase it at the next Builders." I nearly dropped the phone. I don't do that," I said. She said, "You already do. You just don't have a platform yet." I told her I'd think about it. Because it scared me. Not the work, but the stage. Later that night, I sat in the barn with the shop lights dimmed, sipping the last of a cold coffee and staring at the frame of a bike I'd started stripping that morning. It was an old Ducati, dented, fire damaged, nearly scrap, the kind of thing no one thought was worth saving. The perfect candidate. I imagined it reborn. Custom matte silver frame, hand-tooled leather seat, twin pipes with a whisper growl. Not flashy, not loud, but unmistakably alive. I texted Shayna. "Let's do it." She replied within seconds. "We'll call it Project Ember." 1 week later, I hung a new sign in the shop. Langridge Restorations and Design. It wasn't just a garage anymore. It was a studio, a forge, a place where forgotten things became remembered again. Ivy came by that Saturday to see the changes. She walked slow, eyes trailing across the powder coating rig, the newly tiled floor near the paint station, and the small client lounge I'd set up with coffee and local pastries. "You proud of yourself yet?" she asked. "Working on it." She smirked. "Let me know when it kicks in. We'll celebrate." Then she handed me a box. Inside was a custom leather jacket, black, embossed with the shop name across the back in gold thread. "Every empire needs a uniform," she said. The bike was nearly done. 3 months of stripping, welding, sanding, painting, wiring, every single step done by hand. My hand. Late nights, burned fingers, sketches crumpled and redrawn on the back of invoices. It didn't matter. This one had to be perfect. Project Ember wasn't just a showpiece. It was a culmination, a declaration, a kind of silent scream turned sculpture. The paint was a soft matte charcoal. The seat, stitched caramel leather. The pipes were dual wrapped and tuned for a low rumble you'd feel before you heard it. People came by the shop just to look at it. No one touched it. Even Ivy kept her distance. "This thing's sacred," she muttered once, circling the bike like it was holy. "You know that, right?" I knew. The day before it was said to ship out for the Builders Summit in Santa Fe, I stayed late to clean the frame. Every inch had to gleam. I wasn't just sending a motorcycle. I was sending a version of myself, the one who'd built something from silence and steel. The shop was quiet, the lights low. Then the bell over the front door rang. And for a second, I thought I'd imagined it. But it wasn't in my head. A figure stood there, just inside the doorway. Tall, familiar. A little heavier than I remembered, with grayer hair and a posture that didn't command the room the way it once had. It was my father. He looked out of place again, but not like Mom had. He wasn't stiff or rehearsed. He looked humbled. "I wasn't sure you'd still be open," he said. "I'm not. I was almost done anyway." He stepped further inside, slowly, like he was walking into a church. "This the one from the magazine?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just stood, set down the rag, and waited. He walked around it once, hands in his coat pockets, eyes scanning everything, seat, welds, color. I could see him piecing it together, not just the bike, me. "You always did have a steady hand," he said. "I remember watching you fix your cousin's lawnmower when you were 12. Thought you were going to lose a finger." I almost smiled. He wasn't here for a fight. He was here for something else. "I didn't come to fix anything," he said slowly. "I know that's not how this works. I just wanted to see it for myself. What you made. What I missed." His voice cracked a little on that last word. Missed. Not ignored, not dismissed. Missed. That mattered. More than I wanted it to. I said some things back then, things I meant at the time, things I thought would protect you. But I see now, I wasn't protecting anyone. I was preserving something that didn't need preserving. He looked around the shop like it had grown out of the ground, like it belonged here more than he ever had. "You built this," he said quietly. "All of it." I didn't nod, didn't cry, didn't hand him absolution like a napkin at a diner, but I didn't turn away either. I built it because no one ever thought I could. He nodded. I didn't. Another pause. "Do you hate me for it?" I considered that for a long moment. "I did," I said, "for a while, but then I stopped needing anything from you. And that was freedom." He nodded again. "And now?" I shrugged. "Now I just want to ride." He smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't proud, it wasn't pitying, it wasn't strained. It was human. "He heard you might be riding out west," he said. "Santa Fe. The bike's going to be displayed." He looked at it again. "She deserves it." So did I. But I didn't say that. I didn't have to. Before he left, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small package. Not wrapped, just a brown box with a faded mechanics logo on the side. "I kept this from your grandfather's shed. Thought maybe it should come back to where it belongs." Inside was a set of calipers. Old, worn, the kind that told time in thousandths of an inch. Tools that told a different era. I took them. Not as a gift, but as an artifact. A symbol that maybe, something could be passed down that wasn't just silence and standards. The next morning, I shipped the bike. I watched it get loaded into the crate with foam, straps, and a warning sticker, "Fragile, work of art." It made me laugh. Ivy stood beside me, arms crossed, wind tugging at her sleeves. "Are you ready?" "I think so." "Do you think it'll win?" I smiled. It already did. And it had. Because 10 years ago, I stood in my parents' kitchen with a tin of cookies and no seat at the table. And now, I owned the damn table. Built it from steel and sweat. Decorated it with motor oil and vision. And when they finally walked through the doors of what I made, they didn't find a failure. They found a woman. Unapologetic, unbought, uninvited, and absolutely unstoppable.